till we get basically 3 weeks, just about in a few days, until we get to the other deadline here. So,
right.
What do you think? What do you think? Just gut feeling. Where do the Indians need to be? Because I would say anywhere within where they're at. Any further back, then this is a null and void point. But if they're where they are or closer to a playoff spot by that time, do you think that as long as the Indians remain there, then the front office does try to, obviously it's not going to be a blockbuster at that time of the year, but try to get a trade for another pitcher, try to bring somebody in to push that final 2 games in the wild card without having to go crazy with the prospect?
If they can get someone, and I can't think of a good example, I know what you mean. I always like a good example for these scenarios. But if you can get a guy a veteran who will give you 6 good innings, for the month of September, and try to shore up that rotation for next to nothing, I think they try to make that trade if they're in it. But I would say, as crazy as it sounds, I think this is like Hoosiers. Our team's on the field, and they're gonna go with what they got.
Our team's already here.
Yep, and help's not coming. And I think if you come up with a guy that fits that bill, and I'm sure there's one out there. Every team that we just named is looking for that guy too. And yep. I think it is very likely that one of those other teams will overpay or pay more than what the Indians would in that scenario. As crazy as it sounds, I think the Yankees somehow come out of this because I think they want it the worst, because I think they want to send Derek Jeter out on a playoff note. And so if a team is going to trade away a minor league player and blink when a team is asking for too much on, August 25th, I think New York is the type of team that will do it before maybe some of the others. That's just my gut feeling. But I suppose it's possible, but I wouldn't hold out hope for a trade to make this roster better. I think it's a 90% shot that you're going with the guys you got.
And you know what? Like you said, in this weird anomaly of a season, going with the guys you got has you right there with everybody else for that second wild card. So it is what it is, and you just enjoy the ride. And I see Bruce, I see some other guys sending me some messages about what we're talking about here. And I know you didn't get to join me after the trade deadline last week. You were with me the day before when the Indians had made the Masterson deal, and right before whatever else with Cabrera that they did there. I didn't know what to say to people, because I'm with you. As far as the 2 trades that they made, the point that I kept making was, no matter anything else, I don't care if the Indians had acquired David Price. Those 2 cats were going out the door for what the best deal they could get for them is. And now some people, because some people go, well, they got nothing for both of them. Well, first off, I don't agree with that. But secondly, even if that was true, that's exactly what they have for them all season long, and what they're going to get for them when they hit October. But I don't believe they got nothing. But people separate the arguments and don't separate them, I should say, and don't realize that that's different than what they could have done to make this team better now. Bruce in the chat room says, why is everybody happy with being a 500 team? I go back to what you said several weeks before the deadline, and you just kept bringing it up. The kind of rhetorical question, what deal is out there for you to make that? Because here's the thing, bro, and I don't think I ever brought this up on the air. I tweeted about it, and matter of fact, my tweet was kind of confusing because somebody thought that I was stating a fact and not what a listener told me. I had a listener tell me this is the kind of stuff that the crazy trade scenario that the average fan will come up with. I had a guy tell me that based on what Tampa did with David Price, that the Indians could have easily gotten David Price for a combination of Cabrera, Masterson, and a prospect not named Francisco Lindor. And I'm like, I want to live and breathe the air on whatever planet you live on, because that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. What would possess somebody to think that a team is going to take two players walking away who are doing nothing and a prospect not named Lind? I couldn't believe it, but it was stated to me that if I didn't believe that I was just following the company line from the cheap Dolans. And I'm like, listen, I don't even like the Dolans. I do think they're cheap, but you're crazy. You're living on planet insane if you think that that's even in the realm of possibility. I go back to David Price is just an easy example because he's a big name and he's a pitcher, and that's something that intrigued the fans. But plain and simple, if you don't believe it, then you can choose not to believe the truth. But Tampa looked at the Indians. The offer changed. They even lowered it. Initially, they wanted Santana, Salazar, and Brantley. Then eventually, it narrowed down to Salazar and Brantley. And I had people, and Bruce is one of them, and I love Bruce, that said I'd make that trade in a heartbeat. And I'm like, brother, you're nuts. Number one, I don't know that I'd make that trade with a contract extension for David Price, let alone how does that trade make you better for this season, and if you don't have an extension, for anything beyond next season, and you've just given away the one actual offensive threat your team has.
Yeah, well, if I could get a contract extension from David Price,
that's different.
I would make that deal right there with Bruce.
That's the difference, and I'm with you because you can lock him up.
You don't win without starting pitching, and the Indians are finding that out right now. I mean,
I agree.
We just laughed out loud at the thought of the Indians in a playoff series with Bauer, Salazar, and TJ House. I mean, because we know how ridiculous that sounds, and so I would make that deal. But to go back to the greater point that you were making, Justin Masterson and Asdrubal Cabrera are both guys who are having, underachieving seasons and have expiring contracts, and you're not going to get, anything for them that's going to move the needle, that's going to affect the roster. And I actually think that they did pretty well in those deals, to be fair. And
Same here.
I don't want to go. I don't know if we want to go too far down this road at this point, but talking about my idea of trying to reappropriate some funds, I look at both of those trades as the possibility of being able to do that over the winter, because if they feel that the Ramsey kid, is a guy that can play at the big league level, or if they decide they like him and, a Carlos Moncrief or a Tyler Naquin or whoever, that may open the door to trying to move David Murphy and his $6 million contract to free that money up to try and get another pitcher. And something that I think, maybe is a conversation for another day. But, every Indians fan always wants to sell their guy when he's at its lowest and try to get somebody else's player at their best. But something that I think when we get to the winter, you're really going to have to sit down and think about is, if you want to make this rotation better, would you trade a guy like Lonnie Chisenhall? Because he's a guy you're selling high on right now, and he still has plenty of flaws. I mean, he defensively is a mess. I mean,
offensively, he may still be a mess. We have no guarantee that he's not going to come back down to earth.
And he had a great first half of the season, and he has been pretty cold since, and he's started to find it here in recent weeks, I think. But at a certain point, I think he's the kind of guy that you can get value for. And I look at those deals that were made, they're adding depth, they're adding options on the offensive side of the ball. And I think they have no choice. And I think it's common sense that when they get to the winter, the prerogative to improve this team is going to be pitching and defense. And so if even with this team that, has this up and down offense, I mean, I think we'll find out that if we can get someone out on a regular basis and catch the ball, suddenly we'll score enough runs to win all of a sudden. It'll be magic, okay?
Magic, brother.
It'll be magic offense. All of a sudden, when we get people out and catch the ball, we'll suddenly have enough runs to win. And, I look at those deals. I'm not saying that the acquisition of Zach Walters it means that Lonnie Chisenhall's heading out of town, but I'm saying there's another guy who could potentially, be a piece on this team in 2015, and maybe make this team better or free up the opportunity to trade a guy like Chisenhall, because I do think that you could get something that could help this rotation for Chisenhall. And
I agree.
And I think that those are things that they're gonna have. They have no choice but to at least look at them coming this winter. And so for those reasons, that's why I like those deals that they made last week. I think it definitely starts to give them a little bit more flexibility.
And you and I talked about the possibility of trading Michael Bourne in the offseason and how this may be the beginning of that. I still think, I don't know if you've heard me mention it, I still think Zach Walters was not acquired for the Indians. I still believe that they did a lot of research. They did a lot of trade talks with teams before they moved Asdrubal. They knew who was looking for what. And the Indians, they love to go, hey, by the way, Seattle, if you needed somebody else in this, who are some guys you'd be interested in? Oh, this guy. Okay, cool. We'll check back with you later. I think in their research and seeing the dearth in the decent hitting middle infield prospects that were available with people looking for Cabrera, I think that maybe, not that they don't like him and not that he's somebody that they would keep if they had to, but I think that he was somebody that they acquired with the intention of adding him to a package of doing something in the offseason. I think that fits kind of that whole, we find a piece for you from somewhere else and we'll go acquire it so then we can get something else from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's possible. And I mean, really, if you look at,
just my
the AAA level or your young players at your infielders, I mean, we know or we assume that Lindor will be your shortstop next year, and you're going to have Jason Kipnis. But I mean, at Columbus right now, you have Giovanni Urshela, and that's a guy that I think is very intriguing. If Giovanni Urshela may be the most improved player in the Indians minor league system in the last 2 years, and getting back to pitching and defense, I don't know what Urshela would hit at the big league level right now, but I know he would catch the ball, and I know he would make this team better defensively immediately. And I think the Indians have concerns as to what he would hit too. He's a guy who, I mean, honestly, when I saw him at the beginning of 2013, a year ago at Akron, he looked to me like a guy who was suffering in an organization that didn't have enough depth, because he was at AA and should have still been at high A. And something clicked halfway through the season, and he had a much better second half at Akron than he did first. And this year he came out, he's bigger, he's stronger, and he started at Akron after a really good spring training and good year, and he looked like a man among boys at Akron to start the year, and was quickly promoted to Columbus and has produced all year. And I mean, I think he's in part why maybe you kick the idea on Chisenhall, but if you don't kick around the idea on Chisenhall, you may kick around the idea on him, because I think he has value for someone else. And the same goes for Jose Ramirez, and you consider Walters. I mean, there's four guys there that are at the AAA or big league level, and there's certainly not space for all of them to play. So how do you use those guys to try and make yourself better? And so, I think if you wrote down, Chisenhall and Urshela and Jose Ramirez and Zach Walters, I would say that there's an above average chance that all of those names aren't in this organization, probably on opening day, because I think they use at least one of them to try and make this rotation better.
And the fact that they did something, this is why I say what I say about Walters. The fact that they did something that they don't do, you and I were even texting about that. The fact that they paid Asdrubal to go play somewhere else in order to get the guy that they wanted back in the deal. That screamed to me that there's